This is my grandfather, Mr. Jefferson Smith. And here's my grandmother, Mrs. Florine Anita Smith. The two got married and had a beautiful family consisting of 13, yes, 13 children. All of them can't even fit in this picture. But one of those children is my mother. There she is in the white shirt with the big poofy hair. And here's a more recent picture of my mom, Dr. Linda Smith Fikes. My mom was number 9 of the 13 children. She was born in 1951 at a heightened time during the segregationist period in Oklahoma, Mississippi. Oklahoma is a really small town about 40 miles outside of Jackson, Mississippi. The town is so small, growing up I always thought everybody there was related. There's the dirt road that leads to her childhood home, which in fact still stands today. My aunt and cousins still live there, and my mom goes to visit every single year. Now that you've met my mom and seen where she's from and seen her childhood home, let's go back to my grandfather. That's him in the middle with the blue coveralls on. He was a farmer, a landowner, a black farmer and landowner in Mississippi in the 50s. That's a picture of all of the land that he owned. Now, he owned land in the height of the Jim Crow era, when typically black people were mostly sharecroppers. So it was a big deal for him to own his own land. Now, to understand why this was so major during that time period, let's take a brief pause and let's review some history, just to go over what times were like in the 50s for black people in Mississippi. Jim Crow ruled the daily life of blacks in the South from about 1865 to the Civil Rights era in the 50s and 60s. Although slavery was abolished, the Jim Crow laws continued to restrict the rights of black people in the South and enforced racial segregation. These were anti-black laws, and during this time, black people were treated as inferior to white people. Black people were in roles of submission and seen as less than, while white people were in roles of superiority. Black people were confined to jobs such as sharecropping. Sharecropping was a type of farming where black people rented small plots of land from white landowners. It was a way for black people to make their way back into the work economy after the Civil War. But it was also known as a new form of slavery. Blacks worked the land and were told they were going to receive seeds and food for free, and the owner would share the profits of the crops. These sharecropping agreements often didn't go as planned. The black tenant farmers often wouldn't make a profit. They were unable to provide for their families, and they often found themselves in debt to the white landowners. There were crooked accounting methods. The white landowners would cheat them out of their money. It was backbreaking and brutal labor for the sharecroppers to take care of the crops, even amidst unexpected conditions such as insect infestations, bad weather that would easily come in and destroy the crops. The sharecroppers, despite all of their work, always ended with the short end of the stick and often owed the landowners and found themselves as the laborers in poverty and in debt. Under these oppressive laws, black people were reminded of their blackness every single day of their lives, and they were also reminded of the white supremacy that existed to keep them in a place where the whites wanted them to be, which was inferior and submissive to them. There were separate facilities for whites and blacks. Whether they were swimming in a pool, going to a school, eating at a restaurant, drinking from a water fountain, the whites did not want black people doing it from or in the same space that they were. Blacks were forced to stand or sit at the back of the bus, and if they had a seat, they were forced to give it up to a white person if they needed it. It was dehumanizing. Despite the strongholds that segregationist and Jim Crow laws had on the social mobility of black people, they resisted. There were dangerous consequences to stances of opposition. Black people would get lynched, murdered. The Ku Klux Klan would burn crosses in front of their homes. But despite all of that, Black Southerners banded together in solidarity and formed a collective stance against the dehumanizing and gross injustices that Jim Crow laws subjected them to for years. This sparked a powerful moment and movement in our nation's history, the Civil Rights Movement.
In the process of working throughout the South and going to jail and getting beat and being in mass meetings and singing, there's one particular song that became the theme song of this movement. It is a powerful song. You can go anywhere in the world today where there is struggle, and you will find this song, and you will still see people in the streets marching and singing it. It is our gift to the world people in struggle. We want to ask you to stand up and cross your right hand over left and sing with us, "We Shall Overcome." We shall overcome. We shall overcome. Lord, we shall overcome someday.
So that was just a brief historical backdrop of what was going on during the time when my mother was growing up and when my grandfather owned land in Mississippi. So I took some time and I asked my mother some questions about what it was like coming from a family, a Black family, owning their own land and having their own farm in Mississippi during these times. I also asked her some questions about what it was like growing up during that time.